Paris does not look like a city that grew. It looks like a city that was decided. From above, the logic is so clear that it almost feels like a diagram. Long, straight avenues cut across the city at precise angles. Wide, tree-lined corridors connect one monument to the next. At first glance, Paris looks composed. But that is not true. Before Paris became this beautiful, before the grand avenues, the uniform facades, it was something else entirely. It was something dense, dark, and difficult to govern. It was something that smelled of waste and echoed with gunfire. So, the Paris that most people photograph today was not simply inherited. It was imposed. And the real question is not how Paris was rebuilt. The real question is why the rebuild still works on our minds. Why does a normal Parisian street corner feel ceremonial? Why does a boulevard feel less like a road and more like a command? The reconstructions in this video are visual interpretations, guided by maps, engravings, photographs, and historical references. They are not the past itself, but they help reveal the shape of a city that no longer exists. To understand how Paris became this controlled, monumental city, we first have to begin with the first secret of Parisian design. That secret is hidden in a single word: boulevard. Today, it means elegance. It means wide pavements and tree canopies and iron balconies and limestone facades catching the afternoon light. But the word does not come from any of those things. Boulevard comes from the old language of fortification, from the same family of words as bulwark. It means rampart. It means a defensive edge. It means a wall built to keep armies out. And that is the memory carried by the first great Parisian boulevards. It all started in 1670, when Louis XIV made a decision that would shape Paris for the next 3 centuries. Back then, France had won a series of military victories, and the king, certain that Paris no longer needed defending in the same way, ordered old city fortifications to be torn down. In their place, his minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert helped turn the former defensive line into wide, tree-lined promenades running along the right bank, stretching from the Porte Saint-Antoine near the Bastille toward what is now the Place de la Madeleine. These became the Grands Boulevards. They were broad, lined with trees designed for walking, for seeing, for being seen. The same place where soldiers had once stood guard, Parisians now strolled. This is the first revelation. The boulevard was not born elegant. It was born from a fortification. Louis XIV turned a wall into a promenade and invited the public to walk where soldiers had stood. And that inversion is the founding logic of every Parisian boulevard that came after. And then came the 18th century. By this time, the Grands Boulevards had become some of the most fashionable public spaces in the city. Theaters opened along the Boulevard du Temple. The aristocracy promenaded toward the western end. Working people gathered farther east near the Bastille. The boulevard had become, almost by accident, one of the first great democratic stages in Paris. But it was not designed as one. Neither was it intended to be one. But it was eventually used as one. The Boulevard du Temple became so famous for crime melodramas that Parisians nicknamed it the Boulevard du Crime, and none of this came from a single modern master plan. The Grands Boulevards were the product of a wall being demolished, a king wanting to impress, and a city filling in the space that followed. But the success of the boulevard did not solve the rest of Paris. By the middle of the 19th century, the rest of the city was in serious trouble. The population of Paris had risen dramatically in the first half of the century, and the city's medieval core had not changed shape fast enough to accommodate it. Streets in the oldest neighborhoods were often only a few meters wide, Some were narrower than that. Buildings pressed together above pedestrians so tightly that sunlight barely reached the ground. Wagons and carriages could barely move. Street vendors, porters, laundresses, carts, horses, shop signs, and crowds all fought for the same narrow ground. Waste ran through the streets. The Seine received much of what the city discarded, and then cholera exposed the danger in that environment. The epidemic of 1832 killed approximately 20,000 people in Paris, and it did not stop there. Cholera returned in 1849. Fear of disease returned again and again. And each time, the death toll was highest in the densest, darkest, narrowest parts of the city. The medieval street pattern seemed to hold the crisis in place like a container. And the streets held something else too. Between 1830 and 1848, Paris repeatedly became a city of armed uprisings, and in the narrow lanes, ordinary furniture became a wall. Cobblestones became weapons. Carts overturned. Streets were sealed shut. During the Revolution of 1830, thousands of improvised barricades were erected across the city. During the February Revolution of 1848, the number rose even higher. The narrow street was not just a health problem, it became a political weapon. So when Napoleon III became emperor in 1852, he walked into a capital that was simultaneously overcrowded, diseased, difficult to govern, and haunted by revolution. But he wanted more than renovation. He wanted, among other things, a city that could not be barricaded so easily. In order to get that, he appointed a civil administrator named Georges-Eugène Haussmann as prefect of the Seine in 1853. But there was one problem. Haussmann had no formal training in architecture or urban planning. He had studied law, but he had a talent for administration, a gift for wielding power, and no patience for anything that slowed him down. Napoleon III reportedly worked with large maps of Paris, with lines drawn across the city showing where new boulevards should cut. His mission to Haussmann is often summarized in 3 words: aérer, unifier, embellir. The instructions were simple. Give Paris air, connect it, make it beautiful. But Haussmann had another description for what followed. He called himself an artiste démolisseur, an artist of demolition. In his memoirs, he wrote about the gutting of Paris with unmistakable satisfaction. What followed was one of the largest urban transformations any European capital had ever seen. Over 17 years, Haussmann and tens of thousands of workers opened new streets, demolished vast sections of old Paris, and rebuilt entire districts in a new visual language. Roughly 64 kilometers of streets were pierced through Paris. Thousands of old houses disappeared. Thousands of new buildings rose in their place. They built hundreds of kilometers of sewers. They planted thousands of trees. They extended gas lighting across the city. And this renovation came with terrible consequences. First, many Parisians were displaced or pushed outward over the course of the transformation. Second, rents in many central districts rose sharply during the Second Empire. Third, wages for many workers did not rise at the same pace. Haussmann even demolished the house where he was born to make room for his own boulevards, and when the project was finished, a large share of central Paris had been cut open, realigned, or rebuilt in under 20 years. Much of what tourists assume is timeless. Paris was shaped in a single generation. That is the second revelation. Paris does not simply look like a medieval city with elegant improvements layered on top. It looks like what it is: a medieval city that was cut open, selectively demolished, and rebuilt into a new order. The elegance is not ancient, the street pattern underneath it is. Now, how did the boulevard itself become the instrument of all this? That is because the Haussmannian Boulevard is not only wide, it is directional. It takes your eye and sends it forward. So where the old medieval streets bent and folded and hid what was around the corner, the new avenues ran straight toward a fixed point. A monument, a dome, a public building, a destination placed precisely where the street aimed. Look at the Avenue de l'Opéra. It runs in a straight line from the edge of the Louvre district directly toward the Palais Garnier, which sits at the end of the view like a prepared surprise. The opera was not placed there accidentally. The avenue was designed to deliver you to it. Look at the 12 avenues radiating from the Arc de Triomphe. Each one is aimed. Each one makes a building, a monument, or another avenue its destination. The power is not only in the arch. The power is in the fact that 12 streets are pointing at it simultaneously. Paris uses perspective the way a palace uses a central axis. A palace tells you where to stand, where to look, and what matters. The Haussmannian Boulevard does the same thing at the scale of an entire city. But its straightness also had another purpose. A 5-meter medieval alley could be sealed with furniture in minutes, but a 30-meter boulevard could not be closed so easily. Wide streets gave troops room to maneuver and gave authorities clearer lines of movement through the city. Haussmann's works were not only about suppressing revolution, they were also about sanitation, traffic, infrastructure, prestige, parks, and imperial ambition. But it would be naive to ignore control. The boulevard was beautiful. But it also made insurrection harder to organize and easier to suppress. And once the street was widened, once the long perspective was established, something else happened. The boulevard had to be contained. Because a wide road without enclosure is just an empty space. And after it was contained, what gave the Haussmannian Avenue its power was the wall that held it. That wall was the facade. The typical Haussmannian apartment building is one of the most recognizable architectural objects in the world and one of the least understood. It is calm, repetitive, disciplined. It consists of pale limestone, aligned cornices, regular windows, iron balconies, often emphasized on the 2nd and 5th floors, a strong base, a mansard roof of zinc, and enough ornament to signal elegance, not enough to break the unity of the street. Because the visual language was so distinct, the rules guiding it were also strict. Building regulations controlled the height, alignment, materials, and general appearance of facades along the new boulevards. The interiors belonged to the owners, but the exterior belonged to the city. So a Haussmannian building is private property that behaves publicly. The owner controls what happens inside, but the face the building shows to the street is not a personal expression. It is a contribution to a larger composition. The building submits to the boulevard, and when hundreds of buildings submit to the same rules across dozens of streets and arrondissements, the viewer begins to sense something that cannot be pointed to directly. They sense that the city obeys a single authority. That feeling is power. That is not all the facade does. The facade also encodes a social hierarchy. In many Haussmannian buildings, the grandest apartments sat above the ground floor, often on the 2nd floor, with taller windows and the most prominent balcony line. So as you rose through the building, the ceilings often lowered and the prestige diminished. And at the very top, under the mansard roof, in the rooms too small and too hot for anyone who had a choice, lived servants, workers, students, and poorer tenants. The structure was designed to hold the most elegant face on the street while hiding inequality behind the roofline. That was not accidental. It was built into the social logic of the design. So beneath those facades, out of sight, ran the other half of Haussmann city. Hundreds of kilometers of new sewers were constructed or expanded under Paris during the transformation. Aqueducts brought cleaner water into the city. Gas pipes carried fuel for the new lampposts that extended public life into the night. This matters because power in architecture is not only what you see, it is also what disappears. A medieval city shows its problems openly: waste in the street, darkness after sunset, disease in the air. But a modern capital hides those problems inside systems. The sewer carries the waste. The lamp removes the darkness. The aqueduct carries cleaner water. And the citizen, walking on a clean, lit, drained, and ordered boulevard, feels that the state has entered daily life and made it function. That feeling is legitimacy, and Paris made this unusually visible. The transformation was not only about streets and buildings. Napoleon III had spent time in London and admired its parks. Haussmann and his team created and redesigned major public green spaces: the Bois de Boulogne, the Bois de Vincennes, the Parc des Buttes-Chaumont. Carved out of a former quarry and rubbish dump in the northeast. The Parc Monceau, smaller squares scattered throughout the arrondissements. Paris learned to do the two things that most cities still do not understand. It learned to intimidate and charm. It had grandeur on the boulevard, softness in the park, authority in the facade, and pleasure in the shade. The people who were displaced, however, did not find the parks particularly consoling. Many were pushed outward from neighborhoods they had lived in for generations into peripheral arrondissements where rents were still more affordable. They were pushed toward the 18th. The 19th, the 20th, Belleville, the eastern edges of the expanded city. The critics were vocal even then. The writer René Héron de Villefos, looking back a century later, concluded that Haussmann had done more damage than 100 bombings. And finally, Haussmann was dismissed in 1870. But he was not dismissed simply for the demolitions, nor simply for the displacement. The accounting had become impossible to defend. The works had cost enormous sums, and the financing methods, kept partly opaque from Parliament, had become a scandal. After he was dismissed, Napoleon III fell from power later that same year, during France's catastrophic defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. So while the empire collapsed, the boulevards remained. And over the following decades, the city that had been imposed began to be inhabited. Artists painted the new avenues, writers walked them. Marcel Proust moved into apartment number 102 on the Boulevard Haussmann in 1906, lined his bedroom walls with cork to keep the noise of the boulevard out, and spent years writing about the nature of time and memory inside the architecture that had erased much of the city he was trying to remember. The Impressionists found in the new Paris a subject the old city could never have offered in the same way. The long perspective, the crowd in motion, the light on the wet stone. Gustave Caillebotte painted figures looking down from Haussmannian balconies onto boulevards below. At the end of the day, people realized that Haussmann had not only rebuilt the city, he had built a new way of seeing it. That is the third revelation. The boulevard not only changed how Paris moved, it changed how Paris was imagined. It became the picture of the city that the whole world would carry. And it has never been replaced. So when people say Paris looks powerful, they are only partly describing the buildings. The boulevard is the corridor of attention. The aligned facade is the shared wall. The monument at the end of the view is the prepared destination. The tree is the column without a roof. The park is a controlled release of pressure. The sewer is the hidden machinery that makes the entire surface feel clean. And the person walking through it, the tourist with a camera, the Parisian on their way to work, the schoolchild visiting for the day, becomes, without knowing it, part of the composition. That is the final irony of what Haussmann built. He designed Paris to project imperial authority, to reduce the power of barricades, to make the state visible and legible. And in many ways, it worked. The Paris Commune of 1871 was suppressed through a city whose new boulevards made military movement easier than it had been in the old medieval street maze. But authority does not outlast the institution that built it. The empire fell, but the boulevards stayed. And what had been designed as a grammar of control became, over time, a grammar of identity. Parisians protested on those boulevards, celebrated on them, mourned on them, marched, argued, kissed, photographed, and lived on them. The meaning changed, but the form did not. Because the strange thing about great urban design, whether it was built in service of freedom or in service of power, is that the street does not care what it was built for. It only cares what it is used for. And the Parisian Boulevard, born from the memory of a rampart, turned into a promenade, weaponized as an imperial avenue, and eventually inherited by the city it once tried to control, has been used for almost everything a city can contain. That is why Paris feels different from cities that were planned around a single founding idea. London absorbs centuries and lets them argue. New York imposes a grid and dares the city to fill it. Rome layers empire over empire until the ground itself becomes history. Paris edits. Paris takes what exists, decides it is not enough, and cuts through it with a straight line. And the result is a city that looks ancient, but whose most famous visual identity was shaped in less than 20 years. A city that feels inevitable, but was imposed by an emperor, a prefect, maps, workers, demolition crews, engineers, and contested public debt. A city whose most famous symbol of elegance began with the memory of a military wall. So the next time you stand on a Parisian boulevard and feel that strange, composed sense of grandeur, look carefully. Notice the straight line. Notice the repeated balconies. Notice the pale stone facades holding the street like a frame. Notice the monument at the end of the view, waiting where the avenue aimed it. Then look at the roofline. Behind those mansard roofs, in the smallest rooms of many buildings, were the people the system left behind. Invisible from the boulevard. Hidden above the cornice line that the city's regulations required every building to observe. The boulevard was designed to be seen from below. It was designed to make power look beautiful. And it still does. But Paris was not always shaped by streets and control. Before the boulevards, before the plans, before the maps and demolitions, there was another kind of structure that defined how the city understood power. And that structure still stands at the heart of Paris. Notre Dame. In the next video, we are going to be breaking down the entire architecture of Notre Dame. Because where Haussmann designed a city to be read from the ground level, Notre Dame was designed to make the ground feel small. Thank you for watching. More hidden stories are waiting in stone. What should Archmyst uncover next? Tell us below.